was December of 2020, midwinter in Colorado. Three friends in their 20s, Ethan, Cole, and Marissa, decided to go hiking in the San Juan Mountains for a weekend trip. They'd been posting travel vlogs under a small YouTube channel called Edge of Nowhere. The plan was to spend 2 nights in the backcountry, film a short winter survival video, and head home before the next snowstorm hit. Their families said goodbye to them on a Thursday morning. It was the last time anyone saw them alive. They parked Ethan's SUV near a forest access road, packed their cameras and gear, and hiked north. Cole posted one last story to Instagram that afternoon, him laughing, snow all around, saying, "No signal out here. See you in a few days." In the background of the video, there's a quick glimpse of something behind the trees, a tall, dark figure standing completely still. No one noticed it until people later slowed the video down. That night, the temperature dropped below zero. The storm came in faster than expected. At 7:43 p.m., Marissa texted her sister, "Found an old ranger cabin. Safe here. We'll hike back tomorrow." That message was sent from a location about 11 miles from where their car was parked. They never hiked back. When a search team arrived 4 days later, they found the cabin easily. It was small, half buried in snow, with a broken chimney and no windows left intact. The door was open, snow blown halfway inside. 3 sets of footprints led up to the door, but none led away from it. Inside, there were sleeping bags laid out, a burned-out campfire, a camera on a tripod facing the door. The battery was dead. A ranger described the scene as undisturbed, but wrong. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, and no food missing, like they hadn't even eaten dinner. Their backpacks and jackets were still there. When the camera footage was recovered, most of it was normal, them laughing, setting up inside, talking about how creepy the place felt. But the last minute of footage was different. The cabin was pitch black except for the firelight. Ethan said something like, "Do you hear that?" Then Cole whispered, "It's outside. You can hear slow, crunching footsteps in the snow, moving around the cabin, then tapping on the wall. A low hum, like a voice trying to form words." Marissa starts crying softly. Then the fire flickers out and everything goes dark. The camera shuts off on its own. The rescue team spent days searching the area. They found nothing, no bodies, no further tracks, nothing burned, only the camera and their untouched belongings. The official report listed it as death by exposure, bodies unrecovered, but many people who saw the footage say the way the sound faded wasn't normal wind. It was a human sound, a voice saying something like "stay." After the case went public, other hikers came forward with stories from that same region of seeing lights in the trees or hearing laughter echoing through snowstorms. One man said he saw a person standing on a ridge with no jacket on, just watching him when he tried to call out. The figure turned and walked straight into the woods. Locals have a name for the area. Now, they call it the White Silence. Say the mountains there don't take lives. They invite, dim, and somewhere out there, buried beneath the snow and ice, the cabin from Station 17 still stands. If you ever find it, don't go inside. It was late December 2020. The COVID lockdowns were still in full effect. People were tired, isolated, and desperate for a break from the same 4 walls. A couple in their late 20s, Jason and Leela, decided to rent a remote cabin in the mountains of Colorado. The cabin was listed as cabin, 12 inches on the small rental website, far off the main roads, with no neighbors for miles. They thought it would be perfect, a quiet escape, time together, no one around for miles. They arrived in the late afternoon, carrying groceries and luggage. The snow was heavy, falling in thick sheets, covering the forest floor completely. The GPS stopped working about 2 miles from the cabin, and the road became nothing more in the snow-packed trail. Jason parked the car and made a note. If something went wrong, cell service would be unreliable. Cabin 12 looked perfect at first. A small wooden structure, rustic but warm. Inside, it had a fireplace, a single bedroom, a bathroom, and a small living area with a few chairs. Jason and Leela unpacked, lit the fire, and spent the evening cooking and laughing. They even set up a small camera on a tripod to record a few TikTok clips, a silly idea at the time, just to document their stay. That first night was quiet, almost too quiet. Around 11 p.m., Leela said she thought she heard footsteps outside. Jason laughed it off. The wind, he said. Snow can make all kinds of sounds, but she was sure. Footsteps crunching in the snow, circling the cabin. They checked the cameras in the morning. Nothing unusual, just a snowstorm continuing outside. They shrugged it off, telling themselves the stress of lockdown was getting to them. On the second night, things changed around 1:30 a.m. Jason woke up to the sound of tapping. At first, he thought it was Leela in the bathroom, but when he got up, she was asleep beside him. The sound came again, 3 slow taps on the living room wall. He woke Leela. She didn't want to get up at first, but Jason insisted. They looked out the windows. Nothing, just a forest, silent under the snow. No tracks, no shadows. The next morning, they reviewed the camera footage. At first, it was normal, them walking around, cooking, laughing, but the last few minutes caught something strange. The living room door, which they hadn't touched, slowly creaked open. No wind. The snowstorm was raging outside, and the cabin door was locked from the inside. Then, a dark figure appears in the corner of the frame, standing motionless. It doesn't move toward them, doesn't step forward. It just stands there, watching. Jason and Leela tried to convince themselves it was a trick of the shadows, a glitch in the camera. But over the next few nights, the incident escalated. Footsteps circling the cabin. Objects slightly moved from where they had left them. Cold spots in random parts of the cabin. And the figure always in the corner, always in the camera frame when the lights were low. By the 4th night, Leela refused to sleep in the bedroom. She stayed on the couch, blanket over her head, listening. They didn't talk to anyone outside. No phone signal, no neighbors. The cabin felt alive. On the morning of the 5th day, Jason checked the camera again. The final footage showed the fireplace suddenly flicker, even though the fire had gone out hours before. The dark figure was closer to the camera, just in the living room, standing perfectly still. Then, for a fraction of a second, it turned his head toward the camera. No face, just a shadow where the face should be. They left immediately. The rental company told them no one else had reported issues, but local hikers later mentioned Cabin 12 had a history. Decades ago, a family stayed there during a snowstorm. They were never found. Some people say the cabin claims people who are alone, isolated, and desperate people who come there thinking it's safe. Jason and Leela never returned. They don't post videos anymore, and sometimes hikers passing that area say they see lights flicker in the cabin in the middle of a snowstorm, even though the cabin has been empty for years. Cabin 12 is still out there, deep in the snow, waiting for the next couple who thinks they can escape the world. It was early February of 2020. Deep in the Alaskan wilderness, winter in Alaska isn't just cold, it's merciless. Temperatures regularly fall below -30 degrees Celsius. Snowstorms can cover miles of forest in hours, and isolation can turn even a short hike into a deadly challenge. A search and rescue team had been called out to a remote area north of Fairbanks. A hiker, 27-year-old Mark Hammond, hadn't returned from a solo expedition. He was experienced, well-equipped, and familiar with the region. But even the most skilled outdoorsman can be undone by Alaska in the winter. The team of 4 flew in a small helicopter, tracking Mark's GPS signal as best they could. When they landed near the last known point, the forest was silent. The snow was deep, knee-high, and fresh from the night before. They immediately noticed something odd. No footprints leading away from the area where Mark was supposed to be. The only tracks were his, disappearing near Frozen Over Creek. They split into pairs, moving slowly through the trees. About 20 minutes into the search, one of the rescuers noticed a small hill with a half-buried camera tripod sticking out of the snow. They dug it out and found it was Mark's GoPro, still recording. They played the footage immediately. At first, it was normal Mark hiking, checking his map, laughing at the snow, talking to himself. But then the footage changed. He hears something behind him, a low, crunching noise in the snow. He turns the camera slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing, just snow-covered pines, swaying in the wind. Then the sound gets louder, closer, moving with him. He whispers, almost jokingly, "All right, I see you." Very funny, but there's no one there. A shadow flickers across the lens, tall, thin, moving unnaturally fast. Mark freezes. The camera tilts as he crouches. He whispers again. This isn't funny anymore. A growl, low and guttural, echoes through the mic. He spins around. The camera catches it this time. A figure stands across the creek, completely black, impossibly tall, with elongated limbs. Mark steps back, slips in the snow, scrambles to his feet. He runs toward a clump of trees, breathing heavily, the camera bouncing wildly on his chest. The rescuers, watching the footage, felt uneasy. But what came next made their blood run cold. Mark reaches a small clearing and stops. The figure is gone. The wind blows. Snow falls. Silence. Then, whispers, not low, human-like whispers, repeating his name. Mark. Mark. He panics, looking around. He steps forward, and suddenly the camera tilts down, and the screen is filled with snow, frost, and darkness. The last sound is Mark screaming. The rescue team found his body 3 hours later, half buried in the snow near the creek. He was frozen solid, his face twisted in fear. But there was something strange. His footprints suddenly ended mid-forest. No signs of struggle, no tracks leading away from him, and no animal tracks nearby. The team recovered the camera when they played the last minutes in the helicopter. They all swore they heard something else, whispers, low growls, and faint footsteps, circling them outside the cabin in the snow. The official report listed the death as exposure to extreme conditions of the search and rescue. Logs include audio notes from the team's statements, like we heard footsteps in the snow. When we were alone and there was something watching. U.S. Locals say the Alaskan wilderness sometimes claims people, not with cold, but with something else, something patient, something that doesn't leave tracks, something that waits. Mark's GoPro footage was archived, and no one dared to watch it in full, at least not outside of official investigation. Some claim that if you listen closely, you can hear whispers in the background, repeating over and over. You shouldn't be here. Alaska is beautiful, wild, and unforgiving. But in winter, it hides its worst secrets under layers of snow. And sometimes it lets you leave a warning that some never survive to pass on. It was mid-January of 2020, in the remote mountains of Montana. Winter had gripped the area hard, and most of the small towns were covered in heavy snow. Roads were icy, isolated, canked, treacherous, the kind of roads that disappear beneath a snowstorm in minutes. A traveler named David Harper, in his late 20s, was driving through the area late at night. He was alone, exhausted from a long road trip, looking for a place to sleep. Most of the towns were empty due to the winter season. Eventually, he spotted a small, old motel, a single story, neon sign flickering weakly, reading simply, "Frost Inn." The parking lot was covered in snow, but the door was unlocked. David walked inside. The lobby was empty. No desk clerk, no guest. There was a faint smell of mold and old carpet, mixed with the scent of cold air. The heater was running, barely, but it hummed in a way that was almost unnatural. He checked the rooms. One key was in the lobby drawer, simply labeled Room 7. He used it and went inside. The room was small, cleanish, with frost forming on the windows. David sat on the bed, turned on the heater, and tried to warm up outside. The snowstorm was getting worse. Around 1 a.m., he woke up to the sound of scratching. At first, he thought it was mice. Then he noticed something odd, faint writing on the frost-covered window. It wasn't there before. It was in a strange, uneven handwriting. It read, "Don't leave. Stay." He laughed nervously, assuming it was someone's prank from earlier. But when he wiped it off, it reappeared almost instantly. Scratching sounds grew louder now, coming from the walls. Soft, deliberate like nails running along wood. David tried to call for help. No signal. He looked under the bed. Nothing. Then he noticed footprints in the snow outside his window even, though the snowstorm was still falling heavily. And the lot had been empty when he parked. The scratching turned into thumps, heavy, measured. David's camera on the nightstand, he had set it up to vlog, started moving on its own. Tilting slightly in the footage, you can see the shadows in the corner of the room shift, as if something is standing there. A figure, dark and undefined, just beyond the edges of the bed. The more he tried to leave, the more the motel seemed to trap him. The doors were frozen shut, as if something outside pressed against them from the wind. The windows were frosted over, yet footprints appeared on the inside of the glass. David couldn't explain it. He spent the night awake, terrified, whispering to himself. Every time he closed his eyes, he could feel someone leaning over him, just out of view by morning. The snow had stopped. He stepped outside, only to find the entire parking lot empty, pristine. No tracks besides his own car. David left immediately and never returned. When he told locals about the frost inn, they grew pale. Some admitted the motel wasn't listed in any town records. They said it appears to travelers in winter, those who are alone, desperate, or lost, and it doesn't let them leave easily. Some hikers claim that on snowy nights, you can see the motel's neon flickering in the distance, even if it doesn't exist on any map. And if you stop there, you may wake up to find messages written on frost-covered windows, messages meant only for you. Messages like, "Stay," and sometimes people vanish, never to be seen again. David's camera footage was eventually recovered. The last few minutes were chilling, scratching sounds, faint whispers, the camera shaking violently, and shadows moving in impossible ways. Even experts reviewing it couldn't explain it. No wind, no trick of the light, no evidence of intruders, just a cold, watching presence, and a warning. The frost inn still waits somewhere in the snow for travelers who think a warm bed is enough to escape the wilderness. But sometimes the bed isn't what keeps you safe. It was late January of 2020, deep in northern Minnesota, the kind of winter where the sun barely rises and the wind cuts through your jacket like knives. A group of 4 ice fishermen, Tom, Eric, Sarah, and Mike, had set out early in the morning to a remote, frozen lake called Blizzard Lake. The lake was popular among locals, but if few ventured there in January, the storms could appear suddenly, and the ice, while thick, was unpredictable. They drove hours from the nearest town, packed with gear, snowmobiles, and a small generator. By mid-morning, the lake was empty. No other fishermen, no snowmobiles, just a flat, endless expanse of white ice, broken by a few distant trees and a thin line of forest on the far shore. They set up near the center of the lake, drilling holes, setting up tip-ups, and laughing despite the cold. Everything seemed normal until the first hole went completely silent. Tom had caught something, or so he thought. The tip-up rod jerked violently, pulling against the ice below. He tried to reel it in, but the line went taut then. Nothing, the line stayed tight. But there was no resistance, no movement. Confused, he pulled harder, and the line snapped suddenly, disappearing into the ice. The group laughed nervously, assuming it was a fish. But as the day went on, more anomalies appeared. The ice beneath them made faint cracking sounds, but only in isolated patches, nowhere near their drill holes. The snow around their campsite seemed disturbed, like something moving underneath it every so often. Sarah swore she saw dark shapes shifting just beneath the ice's surface. Mike tried to joke, saying it was shadows or reflections. As evening approached, the temperature dropped even further. The wind began to howl across the flat lake, carrying strange echoes. They decided to pack up early. Despite the day's catches, Tom noticed one of the tip-up lines was again taut. He tried to pull, and this time the line moved with surprising speed, faster than any fish they had ever caught. When he managed to drag the hole's contents out, it wasn't a fish. It was something else, something dark, slimy, and vaguely humanoid. They couldn't make out details in the fading light, but it was clearly alive, and it was far larger than anything that could survive under normal ice conditions. Fear set in. The group debated leaving immediately, but storm clouds were approaching from the north. They loaded their gear and tried to drive back to shore. That's when the first accident happened. Mike's snowmobile suddenly stalled, engine dead, despite a full tank and warm battery. He tried to restart it, but it wouldn't budge. Then they heard it, a low, groaning sound coming from beneath the ice. At first, they thought it was the ice cracking under their weight, but the sound moved with them. It was below the surface, circling them, following them. Sarah began recording on her phone. The footage shows their tracks across the ice. Suddenly, shadows appear beneath the surface, moving faster than they should. Dark shapes rise slightly, then disappear again, like something was swimming just below, tracking their every move. They tried to leave, but one by one, their gear started failing. Snowmobiles wouldn't start. Radios lost signal. The generator sputtered and died. By nightfall, the lake was dark, the wind howling, and the shapes beneath the ice were everywhere. The whispers began low, almost indistinct, as if coming from below the frozen surface. The recordings pick up faint words. Stay, stay. The group huddled together, shivering, terrified, unable to move. At some point, one of them, Tom or Mike, no one is sure, tried to climb onto a snowmobile. It tipped over on its own, as if pushed by something unseen. The shadows below the ice shifted violently, splashing water up through cracks. By morning, search teams were dispatched. They found the snowmobiles half buried, untouched gear scattered across the ice. The ice itself showed no footprints leading off, just the tracks in a tight, chaotic pattern near the center of the lake. Only Sarah's phone was recovered, the partial footage showing the dark shapes beneath the ice, moving faster than anything natural should move, and low groaning that seemed to come from hundreds of feet below the frozen surface. None of the 4 fishermen were ever found. The lake remains closed in winter, but locals say you can sometimes hear strange noises across the ice, groans, whispers, or the sound of footsteps in the snow. Even when no one is there, Lizard Lake waits quietly under its thick ice. It appears calm from above, untouched, but beneath, something lives, something patient, something that watches anyone who dares to step onto its frozen surface. And once it notices you, it doesn't let you leave.